is an honor for me and privilege to deliver a goodwill message on Humanitarian Day, as this year's timely theme is climate change, allowing us to highlight the immediate human cost of the climate crisis, but at the same time compel world leaders to take meaningful climate action for the world's most vulnerable. The Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs will stage what we are calling HASH, the human race, a global challenge for climate action in solidarity with people who need it most, to put the need of climate vulnerable people at the center of the UN Climate Summit, COP26, in November 2021. According to the UN Secretary General, the climate emergency is a race we are losing, but it is a race we can win. The climate emergency, as you are all aware, is wreaking havoc, and time is already running out for millions of the world's most vulnerable. On the World Humanitarian Day, we remind the world that we are caught in a climate emergency. Your Excellencies, friends, and colleagues, the average global temperature is already 1.2 degrees centigrade warmer than the pre-industrial level of 1850, 1900, if history is anything to go by for now. And it is heading to what scientists are calling a catastrophic temperature rise to between 3 to 5 degrees centigrade this century. Humanitarian needs as a result of climate change could double to over 200 million people by 2050, and the humanitarian funding needs could increase to well over $20 billion annually by 2030. The combination of climate change and conflict continue to exacerbate inequalities, pushing people from their homes, disrupting food production and supplies, amplifying diseases and malnutrition, and wrecking healthcare services. The statistics are appalling when we look at the impact. 90% of refugees in the world today are from countries affected by the climate change. In 2020 alone, the statistics were so appalling, with 82 million people forcibly displaced by climate, conflict, persecution, and violence, with 48 million of those within their own boundaries, or borders, as we call it at times, and 26 million as refugees in other countries. This vicious cycle, or so the cyclical nexus of climate, conflict, insecurity, and to the last, the global cross-cutting threat of terrorism, combined with the pandemic, is indeed causing an increase in hunger in the world today, with a serious threat of famine if necessary actions are not taken. The statistic is also heart-rending, with over 41 million people worldwide at risk of hunger across 43 countries. Of these, we have a substantial number of people that are at critical crossroads in our beloved country, Nigeria, especially when we start looking at the northeast Nigeria, northwest Nigeria, and north central Nigeria. The original purpose, as eloquently laid out by my good friend and brother from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, is normally celebrated to highlight the need for better protection of humanitarian workers in crisis. Again, I was looking at statistics before coming here. They're all appalling, and that tells us all the human tragedy that we have to deal with today, and the need to actually bring societies into mainstream peace efforts in whatever we do. In 2020 alone, 276 attacks were recorded against aid workers, 475 victims of which 108 were killed 242 severely injured, and 125 kidnapped. The statistics in Nigeria was also appalling based on the data I had from our state departments and other security apparatus. As we commemorate the sacrifice that our fellow humanitarians have made in the past, we are also able to look towards a future that is focused on ensuring that meaningful climate actions are fully integrated into our humanitarian response. Your Excellencies, friends and colleagues, as I speak to you, there are thousands of trees being planted across Borno states, Adamawa and Yobe State, spanning multiple locations in these states, involving humanitarians, state and local actors and communities have organized themselves to go out and pick up trash, beautifying their surroundings, and meaningful climate discussions are occurring on local state radios, etc. Young Nigerian climate change influencers have been engaging the public on social media and bringing to the forefront the importance of this issue and its impact on the country, but most especially the most vulnerable. Here in Abuja today, I am thrilled, and thank you, Haja Sadia, that we are witnessing today an unveiling or formal presentation of the National Humanitarian Development and Peace Framework and the localization framework in the search of a durable solution to conflicts in Nigeria that will only complement past and present efforts that have been made by everyone involved in this. I always try to characterize the humanitarian crisis in northeast Nigeria that I've been dealing with for 4 years, more plus now. It fits into our classic definition of what we call a complex emergency. And what we have learned from complex emergencies globally is that it presents an intricate web of issues that require the collective collaboration of different actors in the search of a durable solution. The crisis in northeast Nigeria is still the largest in the world as we speak today. At the peak in 2017, since I was in this country, over 2.2 million people were displaced in the Bay States, and over 303,000 refugees in the neighboring countries of Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. The situation also is so dynamic. As we speak today on this World Humanitarian Day, 1.9 million people are currently displaced in the worst affected state of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. In addition to an estimated 1.4 million people in northwest Nigeria and over 1 million people in north-central Nigeria. But there is hope at the end of the tunnel. An estimated 1.6 million displaced people have returned to relatively safe areas, especially in the 3 states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, and they are bringing hope to millions of people that have been affected by this conflict. Your Excellency, friends and colleagues, it's still a sad reality that 8.7 million people in these 3 states need humanitarian assistance, which, based on our analysis, require about $1 billion in 2021. This is in addition to the 1.4 million I just talked about and over 1 million in both northwest and north-central Nigeria. The conflict in northeast Nigeria is being driven the humanitarian crisis that the government of Nigeria and partners are dealing with. But the challenges are still enormous as we celebrate this World Humanitarian Day. But what I really want to emphasize here is that the hope and the light at the end of the tunnel. We're still dealing with deteriorating security situation and shrinking humanitarian space. We are witnessing a reality of increasing humanitarian needs and declining funding. Security and access challenges still persist. And worst of all, we are dealing with an increasing food insecurity and risk of catastrophic food crisis if preventive measures are not scaled up urgently. We estimate 4.4 million people in urgent need of humanitarian assistance in northeast Nigeria, of which 775,000 are at a critical threshold. People want to return, and some of them are returning to unsafe areas, which is a big concern also in terms of basic safety and security. We have a challenge trying to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of what we do and how we can provide better services to the affected population. But worst of it all is the critical gender and protection issues that are exacerbated by all the above factors that I've just tried to outline. The protection concerns are enormous. 80% of the people in Northeast Nigeria that are affected by this crisis are women and children, and you see the same thing when you head towards Northwest and North Central. But let's come to the hope of today, and that is the frameworks that we are going to launch here. From global best practices and based on my continued advocacy, what is clear to us is that there are no humanitarian solutions to humanitarian problems. And after over 4 years dealing with Northeast Nigeria, and after over 30 years dealing with crisis globally, the only solution to the crisis in Northeast Nigeria is peace. There's no other option. As we look at recent surrender of non-state armed actors in the Northeast, we are also able to get a glimpse of hope on the horizon. However, we must also be cognizant of the reality that there is still much work to be done in Northeast, Northwest, and North Central, and the road to recovery and stabilization must continue to unfold in this ongoing humanitarian context. We must continue to meet acute humanitarian needs with an eye and intention towards sustainable development. We must therefore have a shared understanding of the risk and vulnerability that prioritizes, one, prevention always, development wherever feasible, and humanitarian action when needed. I always tell humanitarians the islands of hope are as important as the areas that are worst affected. I call them those corridors of hope that must be built as we address humanitarian needs. We have been with the crisis in Northeast Nigeria, and from our analysis, we have been advocating for a three-pronged approach to find a durable solution to this crisis. One, we do believe in continuation of the counterinsurgency effort of the Nigerian Armed Forces and the counter-terrorism efforts of the multinational Joint Task Force. But our call has been clear. This has to be complemented with what we call dialogue and a peace-building process to achieve peace. The second critical element is continuation of life-saving assistance, which has been done, to the best of my assessment, to one of the best humanitarian responses I've seen globally by both the government of Nigeria and partners. But my advocacy has been very clear, and that is, we must provide humanitarian assistance built around a resilience approach. An approach, one, that helps people to cope with the impact of the crisis, recover from it, and engage in transformative change. Last but not the least, we must address the root causes of crisis, which from our analysis in Northeast is due to prolonged development deficit, multidimensional poverty, governance and human rights deficits, and climate vulnerabilities. Excellencies, friends and colleagues, addressing complex emergencies requires appropriately locally constructed and context-specific initiative to address a duality of two confrontational issues that we address within humanitarian context. That is, one, reduce needs, risks, and vulnerabilities of the affected population, but also build resilience at individual, household, community, and institutional level. The opportunities are enormous. An inclusive dialogue and a peace-building effort, improve collective commitment to saving lives together, tapping into regional efforts initiated by various actors to address the root causes of the crisis, improving national ownership and leadership of the crisis, enhanced coordination of the humanitarian community, private sector engagement, and scaling up durable solutions and stabilization investment to implement the humanitarian development and peace nexus. I will summarize and end my speech by presenting the following approaches that are so dear to me when we talk about humanitarian development, peace nexus, and localization. Success in Nigeria will require a strong focus on addressing the root causes of the crisis. It will also require a robust consideration of a dialogue that discusses strategies and approaches and peace-building efforts that complement the military effort. As my military friend says, kinetic and non-kinetic efforts are critical in finding a solution. There is need for a strong link between peace, human rights, and gender. There is need for a leadership mindset and skill set to work what we call cross pillars, strengthening joint information analysis, operationalizing the collective outcomes, harmonizing resources, and financing accountability and monitoring. I can speak for 10 hours on this day. It's part of my DNA, but I have to pause before everybody gets bored with me. Thank you for coming to this World Humanitarian Day. And Minister Sadia, as I always say, the job we do is thankless, but we always have to remember that humanity is at the core of it. And at times, if you are religious, you pray. For any soul you touch, you bring succor to that soul. And that is what keeps us awake. That is what keeps us from the guns. And that is what keeps us alive. I will not be here with you people today, having been kidnapped for over 15 times in Afghanistan. I'm crying in my heart because I spent all my young days in that country when I see what is happening right now. And I always remember what the Mujahideens were saying when they kidnapped me. This is our war, and this is our place. It is our home. Nobody will take it from us. So they play the waiting game. Thank you for the commitment to humanity, and thank you all for coming today. Thank you.
I think we can do better than that.
I once again welcome you all to this year's World Humanitarian Day celebration. I am honored to present the National Humanitarian Development Peace Framework, which was developed by the National Humanitarian Coordination Technical Group under the directive of the National Humanitarian Coordination Committee of the Ministry. This framework is a multi-track, multi-agency, and multi-stakeholder approach that involves the active and meaningful commitment of relevant stakeholders. Because humanitarian development and peace needs are not sequential, fundamental challenges remain in the coordination and implementation of aid sector. The National Humanitarian Development Peace Framework answers the coherence question and envisions stronger collaboration and coordination among actors from the fields of development cooperation, humanitarian action, and peace building. Considering the gaps we face due to different programming goals and mandates, this framework will provide a more integrated, effective, and efficient methodology for the aid sector to support the development and peace objectives of Nigeria. The strategic intent of the framework is to reduce vulnerabilities and support and promote peace and stability in Nigeria. It must be understood that vulnerability is not innate, it varies over time, meaning that it can be reduced through strategic planning and preparation, as well as through equitable policy making and investment. Thus, it is critical that vulnerable populations be regularly engaged and that they inform all our strategic planning. This modus operandi ensures government hears and acts on the perspectives of how individuals or communities can improve their outcomes in the event of any emergency. The National Humanitarian Development Peace Framework has been developed to counter specific risks through 7 goals, all of which contain set objectives, strategic approaches, and actions. Goal 1 speaks to the improving the quality of living standards for communities, taking cognizance of vulnerable persons and other persons of concern. This goal tackles the specific socio-economic and development needs of communities in the country. When living standards are improved, members have vested interest in nation building and are less susceptible to criminal activities or open to recruitment into terror groups. Improving individual and community living standards creates an enabling environment for social cohesion, national pride, and sustainable development. Goal 2 speaks to enhancing disaster preparedness, prevention, mitigation, and strengthening disaster risk information, governance, and infrastructure. Climate and health-related disasters require both short and long-term thinking and action, local and global perspectives, and the ability of government to work with critical stakeholders to adapt strategies that aid citizens to safety, navigate their changing environment. This goal emphasizes prevention and preparedness as a critical foundation for disaster management and supports a proactive national coordinated response. Goal 3 speaks to the affected communities who will receive timely and holistic humanitarian response. During conflict or natural disasters, affected communities often lose homes, sources of livelihoods, and reduced or no access to social services. Humanitarian response provides essential life-saving assistance to persons of concern to improve their living conditions so they can transition to long-term recovery. This goal ensures responses are not only timely, but wholly beneficial to the persons of concern. Goal 4 is on securing stabilization and recovery of communities. Considering the complex nature of conflict and displacement in Nigeria, it is imperative to progress from humanitarian action to the stabilization, recovery, and reconstruction of devastated communities. This goal supports and protects citizens in a resilient and integrated manner against all shocks. Goal 5 is on better management of migration. This goal is focused on providing a comprehensive approach to migration, which aims at ensuring that migration takes place in a safe, orderly, and regular manner, avoiding loss of lives, protecting the human rights of migrants, and providing international protection to those who need it. It intends to address migration management through fostering job creation, reforms and investments, stemming irregular migration through strategic communication, and enhanced cooperation on integrated border management, increasing collaborative efforts to fight migrant smuggling and trafficking in human beings, promoting the establishment and use of legal migration pathways, as well as granting assistance to refugees and internally displaced persons. Goal 6 is on building resilience for fragility, conflict, and violence. A crisis can be human-made or natural, but in fragile context. It always combines numerous dimensions and makes the population or part of the population acutely and chronically vulnerable. As a result, this goal addresses the root causes of fragility by establishing multi-sectoral partnerships to build community and institutional resilience. Implementing a resilience approach requires engaging with national counterparts according to context, giving special attention to coordination mechanisms, and thinking about peace-building and state-building issues from the onset, even if they are long-term issues. Goal 7 is on peacemaking, peace-building, and sustainable peace. An important aspect of this goal is strengthening the rule of law through social justice and through the promotion of conflict resolution and reconciliation strategies. It also addresses the link between socio-economic development, reconciliation, and post-conflict activities, political and democratic governance, and sustainable development. In addition, this goal supports building local capacities for sustainable peace, post-conflict reconstruction activities, and increasing local participation. It is important to ensure gender equality in all aspects of this goal so that we reaffirm UN Resolution 1325 on the important role of women in the prevention and resolution of conflicts, peace negotiations, peace building, peacekeeping, humanitarian response, and in post-conflict reconstruction, and stresses the importance of their equal participation in full involvement in all efforts for the maintenance and promotion of peace and security. Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, I'm sure you will see that you are adequately represented here. Closing statement. On this note, the National Humanitarian Development Peace Framework is a collective vision jointly developed with relevant stakeholders, such as UN OCHA, and will be deployed through engagement with international, regional, and state actors who are expected to localize, own, and develop implementation strategies that are tailored to specific needs of persons of concern in communities across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic, catastrophic weather events, and insecurity in the Northeast, as well as the Northwest, has created food insecurity in the country. There is need to collectively ensure food security in the country. The Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, through its agencies, has been engaged in providing food and nutrition assistance to address the concerns of food insecurity in the Northeast and other parts of the country. Specifically, the Northeast Development Commission will commence food assistance to the Bay States and the other 3 states in the Northeast on the 2nd of September 2021 to address this issue. In line with the above, the Ministry is also creating a subcommittee on food and nutrition security in the Northeast within the structures of the National Humanitarian Coordination Technical Working Group. As exemplified in the NHDPF, all interventions or actions should work through existing structures. Consequently, I use this opportunity to co-opt the following MDS organizations into the newly set up Food and Nutrition Subcommittee of the NHCTWG to be chaired by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry. Members are the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, the Northeast Development Commission, the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UN OCHA, the World Food Programme, Food Agricultural Organization of the UN, other relevant MDS, INGOs, and NGOs, as recommended by the chair of the NHCTWG. Hence, the NHCTWG will immediately commence its monthly convening to cater to critical humanitarian issues. I reiterate that effective coordination and coherence amongst all relevant actors in the aid sector is needed for the successful implementation of this framework. This is not a time to work in silos, but a time to combine efforts and utilize existing structures and available resources to address the underlying root causes of vulnerability in order to strengthen and promote resilience, peace, and stability. And therefore call on all aid sector stakeholders to work closely with the ministry to create an implementing strategy for the National Humanitarian Development Peace Framework. I hereby launch this framework. Thank you very much.
It is, all distinguished guests here present today, a great pleasure, an honor to be here and be granted this platform to give a remark by taking a stand to protect our planet in a race against time to curb climate change. I thank the Honorable Minister, Hajias Alia Faru, for extending an invitation to be part of this program today. And especially appreciate all stakeholders across the humanitarian and social impact sector for your tireless and selfless service to humanity. Listening to the conversations today and hearing reports on the various activities across the sector to tackle the many humanitarian, social, and environmental challenges we currently face in Nigeria gives me a sense of pride and a hope for a brighter future for our children. Most especially, I am truly proud of the leadership that the Honorable Minister and her team get at building sustainable structures, policies, and systems to coordinate the activities of stakeholders within the sector. Hashtag the human race, a global call to action. As we celebrate the World Humanitarian Day in this period of the COVID pandemic, we are reminded of how important global cooperation is to winning the race against climate change and other societal challenges. In 2020, we were faced with a global health challenge that posed an equal level of threat to us all, breaking down the barriers of race, religion, social and political status, as well as geography. While this was a wake-up call to all and the reality of the fragility of human race as a whole, in the face of a global health crisis, it was also a reminder of how easily penetratable the economic bubbles and barriers separating the most vulnerable from the privileged can be. United in a global plight, we witnessed the remarkable impact that was made in the race against time towards stopping the spread of the virus, taking drastic and extreme measures to protect lives. We watched as health workers and essential workers across the globe put their lives on the line for the sake of humanity. Therefore, on this day, celebrating the selfless service of humanitarians and the vulnerable, we also remember those who paid the ultimate price in the last year in the fight against COVID and show appreciation to all still hard at work to ensure the protection of all vulnerable people by bridging the vaccination gap. As we mark this day, the conversation regarding how we can strengthen our collective resilience in the fight against climate change to ensure that we leave absolutely no one behind is one whose outcome will shape our future as humanity and the role we all play as humanitarians, world leaders, and global citizens of our great planet Earth. In similar ways to the pandemic, the climate emergency has been on a steady course. As we have learned today, wreaking havoc across the world and putting a strain on the humanitarian community and frontline workers dedicated to reversing and preventing the spread of devastation across the world. Now more than ever, it has become pertinent to push for collective action and commitment of nations and leaders to protect the world's most vulnerable people who are often at the fore of the negative impact of climate crisis, the effects of which in many cases affect health, result in the loss of livelihoods, cause displacement and loss of lives. Coupled with the ripple effect of the pandemic outbreak, the climate emergency increases the level of fragility and vulnerability in the global conflict-affected areas such as the Middle East and Nigeria. An evaluation of the vulnerable populations across Nigeria places internally displaced persons, IDPs, host communities in the often climate-induced conflict-affected areas, and returning refugees from the Cameroons, Chad, and Niger as the population most at risk and affected by climate change in the country. Approximately, there are 2 million IDPs in our Bay Area states, that is, Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. In the wake of the COVID outbreak, we are no more in doubt about the threat of climate change to humanity today. According to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the world must cut its carbon dioxide emissions to a net zero by 2050 in order to prevent global warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade or more above pre-industrial levels, affecting change through existing policies. Responding to these conditions, our President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, and our government has, in the past 6 years of the current administration, set in motion strategic steps to address the issues of fragility of our country coming out of protracted conflict and economic downturn through the enactment of policies, establishment of agencies, and institutionalization of this ministry, the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, to coordinate and oversee the expansion of interventions, social investment programs, and other development efforts to support and strengthen resilience among the most vulnerable populations, especially more relevant than ever in the era of the COVID-19 pandemic and rising climate emergency. Thus, it gives me great pride to witness today the remarkable milestones being made by the ministry. As we celebrate the official presentations of the Humanitarian Peace Development Framework today also marks the beginning of another phase, the implementation and institutionalization nationally by all stakeholders utilizing the National Localization Framework. I therefore urge all stakeholders present today to pick up the challenge and join the hashtag #HumanRace to stop climate change in its tracks by utilizing the guidelines of the framework through a localized approach to tackling the environmental issues we face in Nigeria today. I am reminded of the call of Nigeria to action made by Mohamed Yahya of the UNDP, urging Nigeria to take the lead on climate change in the continent and set the pace for other leaders to follow in addressing the climate crisis strengthening our continent and our world today. This call was in response to reports by the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, NEMET, regarding the consistent changes in rainfall patterns, resulting in hotter and drier conditions that could also exacerbate floods, droughts, and heat waves, thereby hampering agricultural production in our rain-dependent food sector. The recent economic reports on rising food prices and food shortages are thus strong indicators of the role climate change is having on our communities and fueling some of the conflicts plaguing our rural communities across the north. Our conversations today are clear indications of the threat of climate change to Nigeria's developmental ambitions, which could stunt and even reverse progress that has already been made by this administration. The 2021 Humanitarian Day theme, #the human race, is thus a reminder of the global and local race to limit climate change and find sustainable solutions to the climate emergency by advocating for global and local partnerships as seen in our proactive and decisive approach to handling of the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. I believe that with a similar level of local and global commitment, driven by collaborations across the public, social, and private sectors, the climate emergency is a race that we as humanity can actually win. It will, however, take an equal level of commitment from world leaders, sacrifices, and concessions from across the globe, as seen during the global lockdown. In Nigeria, the ratification of the Paris Agreement is a step in the right direction towards playing our part in curbing climate change as the top 6 greenhouse emitter in Africa. Also, Nigeria's nationally determined contributions indices made under the Paris Agreement embodies the FGN's effort to reduce national emissions and adapt to the effect of climate change. If fully implemented, these efforts will pave way for a low-carbon economy and result in about 50% reduction in emissions. Other interventions, such as the Solar Power Nigeria program in the Economic Stability Plan, an ambitious program designed by the Rural Electrification Agency, aimed at creating 5 million solar-powered connections through a 140 billion naira financing program, supporting private developers to provide power for about 5 million households. This, in essence, translates to providing renewable off-grid electricity to 25 million Nigerians and, in turn, lead to job creation and economic growth, as estimates project an average annual growth rate of 5% by the year 2030. This represents an important milestone in tackling the challenges of climate change. A localized approach, the National Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus and Localization Framework. The design of the National Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus and Localization Framework is thus a timely contribution to the global fight against climate change and in line with President Muhammad Buhari's plan for tackling climate change by focusing the actions of humanitarian and developmental agencies on the vulnerable populations directly affected by these changing climates and the ensuing stability across the nation through the promotion of local action and a homegrown approach to humanitarian intervention, development, disaster management, and peace building. The framework thus shows our commitment as a nation towards a sustainable future through the strengthening of local agencies, systems, and building a knowledge base from which we can operate. The task of building a resilient future is one which must be given by the collective resources of all nations as we race towards 2030 and pledge our commitment towards fighting climate change and the achievement of the social development goals. We understand the importance of this as a nation and remain committed to driving inclusive policies and dialogue that cut across political and social barriers for a better Nigeria. Our collective approach as human race in addressing the COVID-19 challenge has been a great reminder of how much positive impact can be made when leaders and nations come together and unite under a cause. With the same level of commitment, hashtag the Human Race 2021 will be a great indicator of our ability to successfully achieve the SDGs and how well we handle the pressing challenges from the climate crisis to pandemics, inequalities, and other social economic challenges that we face daily as a race. It is my firm belief that although we are running late, we still stand a chance of winning this race against climate change to ensure that no one is left behind. And with the presentations made today by the ministry and other stakeholders, I believe we are on the right track. I thank you all once more, and may God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you very much.